October 17th, 1814, London, England. At the Horseshoe Brewery on Tottenham Court Road, a 22-foot tall wooden vat containing 135,000 gallons of beer has been slowly falling apart for months. The iron hoops holding it together are corroding. Management solution? Let's wait and see what happens. At 5:30 p.m., they found out. The vat exploded with the force of a bomb. The blast ruptured other vats. Within seconds, a 15-foot tsunami of beer was racing through the slums of St. Giles, demolishing homes, drowning victims, and creating the deadliest happy hour in history. 8 people died. 2 more would die from alcohol poisoning at the funeral parties. Yes, funeral parties with free beer from the flood. You're listening to Wait, That Actually Happened, where we prove history is stranger than fiction. I'm your host, author Daniel P. Douglas, and today we're diving into the time London experienced a literal beer flood that killed more people than most shark attacks. Grab a pint. Actually, maybe don't. So, let me paint you a picture of London in 1814. Napoleon had just been exiled. Britain was celebrating, and no city loved beer quite like London. The Horseshoe Brewery was massive, one of the biggest in the city. They stored their beer in giant wooden vats, some holding over 18,000 gallons. The biggest one? It held 135,000 gallons. That's like 1 million pints of beer in one container. These weren't modern steel tanks with safety features. These were wooden barrels the size of houses, held together by iron hoops and pure optimism. Now, here's the thing about storing massive amounts of fermenting liquid in wooden containers: wood rots, metal corrodes, and beer. Beer is actively fermenting, creating pressure, gas, and stress on those already sketchy containers. For months, workers at the brewery noticed problems with the big vat. One of the iron hoops had slipped. When they reported it to management, they were told it happened all the time. Don't worry about it. It's been standing for years. What could go wrong? The brewery sat right next to St. Giles, one of London's worst slums. We're talking about an area so poor it was called the Rookery, like where birds cluster together in terrible conditions. Whole families lived in single rooms. Some lived in cellars below street level. Irish immigrants, laborers, and the desperately poor were packed into crumbling buildings that should have been condemned years ago. These people lived literally in the shadow of the brewery. They could smell the beer fermenting. On October 17th, they were about to taste it. The massive vat had finally given up. 22 feet of wood and iron exploded outward. The force was so powerful it ruptured several other vats nearby. In total, 388,000 gallons of beer were suddenly free. That's 3.1 million pints of porter, a dark, heavy beer, moving at about 25 miles per hour. The wave of beer smashed through the brewery's 25-foot wall like it was made of paper. It surged into the streets of St. Giles with the force of a tsunami. But this wasn't water. It was thick, dark, alcoholic syrup. The first building hit was a house on New Street. The beer wave demolished it completely, crushing Eleanor Cooper, a servant girl who was washing pots. She didn't have a chance. The wave then hit the Tavistock Arms pub. Yes, a flood of beer destroyed a pub. The irony was lost on the 4 people inside who were killed instantly when the building collapsed. But the worst was yet to come. Remember those basement dwellings I mentioned? The beer found them. It poured through windows, downstairs, into cellars where the poorest families lived. In one basement, Mary Banfield and her 4-year-old daughter were having tea. They drowned in beer. The youngest victim was Zachariah Burnby, age 3, who was swept away while playing in the street. The flood covered several blocks, reaching depths of 2 to 3 feet in some areas. People were swept off their feet. Horses were knocked over. The force of the initial wave was so strong it moved heavy equipment and demolished walls. And here's where it gets uniquely horrible. You can't swim in beer like you can in water. It's more viscous, heavier. It sticks to you. People who might have survived a water flood were dragged down by the weight and thickness of the porter. Within minutes, the streets looked like something from a nightmare. Dark beer mixed with mud, debris, and worse. People were screaming, searching for family members. Some were trapped in the rubble of collapsed buildings. Others were trying to rescue victims from beer-filled basements. The brewery workers? They ran out to help. But what could they do? They had mops. The flood was 388,000 gallons. That's not a mop situation. Here's where human nature really shines through, or doesn't. Within hours, hundreds of people showed up with pots, pans, buckets, anything that could hold liquid. They weren't there to help. They were there to collect free beer. People were literally scooping beer from the streets where others had just drowned. The next day, crowds got even worse. So many people came to gawk at the disaster that a rumor spread that another vat was about to blow. This caused a stampede that injured dozens more. But wait, it gets worse. Some enterprising locals started charging admission to see the beer flood houses. They literally turned a disaster scene into a tourist attraction while bodies were still being recovered. The funerals happened a few days later, and because this is London in 1814, people held wakes with beer. Some accounts say people were drinking beer that had been scooped from the flood itself. At least 2 people died from alcohol poisoning at these wakes, bringing the total death count to 10. The brewery? They went to court. Their defense was basically act of God. Nobody could have predicted that a slowly deteriorating vat that workers had warned them about would eventually fail. The jury agreed. The brewery wasn't held responsible for any deaths or damage. In fact, and this is real, they successfully petitioned Parliament for a tax refund on the beer they'd lost. They got £7,250 back. That's about $575,000 today. The victims' families, they got nothing, not a penny. You know what's crazy? We haven't really learned much about industrial safety since 1814. Sure, we don't have beer tsunamis anymore, but we've had molasses floods. Boston, 1919, killed 21 people. We've had chemical spills that evacuate entire towns. We've had fertilizer explosions that level neighborhoods. And the pattern is always the same. Workers notice problems. They report them. Management says it's fine. It's always been like that. Don't worry about it. Then boom, literal or figurative, and suddenly everyone's shocked that the thing that was obviously going to fail really failed. The London beer flood reminds us that it's never failed before isn't the same as it won't fail tomorrow. Those iron hoops had been slowly corroding for months. Everyone could see it, but fixing it would cost money, stop production, hurt profits. Sound familiar? Boeing's door plugs, train derailments, chemical plants. We're still playing the same game of let's wait and see what happens with people's lives. At least when Victorian London did it, people got free beer out of the disaster. We just get thoughts and prayers. Picture this happening in 2025. A craft brewery in Brooklyn. Their largest fermentation tank fails. Lager floods Williamsburg. Within minutes, it's on TikTok. Beer tsunami in NYC. Influencers are posing in the flood for Instagram. Just survived hashtag beer flood 2025. The brewery's X account would immediately post, "We're aware some customers are experiencing unexpected beer distribution. We're working on it." Food safety officials would condemn the beer as a biohazard, but people would be out there with Stanley Cups anyway. Someone would definitely try to sell flood beer on eBay as a collectible. The conspiracy theories would start immediately. Big Beer did this for insurance money. It's a marketing stunt. The beer doesn't even look real. And somewhere, a brewery executive would be telling reporters, this was an unprecedented act of God, while their own emails warning about tank maintenance sit in their inbox. So that's the London beer flood of 1814, when industrial negligence met human greed and created the world's deadliest happy hour. 8 people drowned, hundreds got drunk on disaster beer, and the company got a tax refund. Next time, we're heading to medieval Italy, where two city-states went to war over a stolen wooden bucket. Yes, a bucket. Over 2,000 people died fighting for this bucket. And here's the kicker: the bucket still exists. You can go see it. It's in a museum, proudly displayed because they won the bucket war. New episodes drop weekly. Subscribe to never miss history's weirdest moments. Until next time, remember, truth is stranger than fiction, and history is weirder than you think. Also, be sure to check out my Substack, Intelligence Bulletin from author Daniel P. Douglas, for more podcast episodes, written articles, and links to my books. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Have a memorable day.